Hey, it's Heather, and it's Q&A week over at Authentic Sexual You. That means I'm answering a question that was sent in by a viewer or a reader of my blogs or someone who's connected to me. If you want to send in your own question, you can do so by leaving a comment below. You can use the form that is linked in the description, and that will keep it anonymous, or you can email me, heather@AuthenticSexualYou.com. And I answer a question every month. So I might not get to you right away, but I will get to you. Question this month is, should I come out to my family about my kinks? And I know a lot of people that have struggled with this. I think anyone who has any sort of alternative sexuality kind of struggles with that line between, being true and transparent about themselves and where they're at in life, and then also fearing judgment, fearing rejection, and then also kind of just not necessarily knowing whether or not this is information that people need to know about you. So I have some evaluating criteria that you might find helpful when you're deciding whether or not you want to come out to people in your life, be they family members or friends or whatever. First of all, what are your kinks and how do they bleed over into your life? Some people are masochists, some people are sadists, some people are, dominant, submissive. Those things can be kept pretty private and don't necessarily, bleed out into your everyday life unless you choose for them to, or you're in a safe space for them to, or any of those things. Some other kinks, like cross-dressing, not always, but that can be a starting point for people to do gender exploration, right? And if you start off cross-dressing for sexual purposes and then find that that's somewhere you want to go with your gender, that's going to bleed out into your life. If you have a fantasy of forced bisexuality, or you like being made to have any sort of intimate relations with the same sex, and you're using that as a cover for, your deeper sexual orientation, that's something that's very much going to bleed out into your life. And when things bleed out into our public lives as opposed to our personal lives, that might be something you want to come out to people about, just so you can get ahead of the message that's going out, and kind of control what manner that goes out and how it's presented to people, instead of being outed or coming out in a way that puts you behind the eight ball and makes you no longer in control of the message that's going out. Question number 2, what kind of relationship history around sex do you have with your family? Are you a family that talks about sex openly and honestly, or is that something that you all kind of keep to yourselves? I know some family members who don't find it odd to go sex toy shopping together because they're like, pleasure, it's good for everybody. My family, it's not a thing we do. So for me to talk about my sex life with my family in any personal way is kind of odd, because it's just not something we do. There are other families where it's completely normal and completely standard behavior. So where's your family at with this? How did they do things? Would it be out of place for you to have a conversation about this with them, or would it be pretty par for, the course? Next question, who are we talking about when we say family? Are you a child, and when I say child, I don't actually mean literal child. I mean adult child, or at least late teen child, who's considering coming out to your parents? Are you considering coming out to your siblings? Are you a parent considering coming out to your adult children? Are you a spouse considering coming out to your spouse? So who are you actually talking about when you say family? How much information do you want to share with them? I think it's quite common, and quite, not common's the wrong word. I think it's quite harmless to come out to our siblings and have them support us. It can be a little more traumatic for parents, because parents often can have a hard time thinking about their children as sexual beings. If you're a parent considering coming out to your adult child, how much do they want to know about your sex life? These are all things that factor in, right? And this is also affected by age. If you're on the younger side of things versus the older side of things, all these factors play in. And finally, think about why you want to come out. Are you trying to shock people? Are you trying to get back at someone? Are you trying to seem edgy? Are you trying to open up and be, vulnerable with your family members to let them connect with where you're actually at? I'll tell you a little story from my personal coming outness. about 6 years ago, when I started exploring alternative sexualities, maybe even 7 years ago, I just come from a conference weekend in the States, and the NCSF, the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom, is a big deal down there. And they were always like, you got to come out, you got to tell people you're poly, you got to tell people that you're into S&M, you got to like stand up and be counted so that people know that we're here and we're okay with it and they're not going to prosecute us, and safety in numbers and blah, blah, blah. So I went home and I was like, yes. I should come out. That is a thing I should do. I should tell my parents, even though we do not talk about sex in my family. I should tell my parents all about my kinks and all about my stuff. And I almost did over with very little sleep in me. And like before I'd had my first cup of coffee, my mom asked me where I was that weekend, and it almost all came out. And that probably would have gone really, really badly because number one, I didn't fully understand myself or my kinks yet. Number two, I didn't know really why I wanted to come out for myself. I was doing it because someone else said I should, not like a driving force within me that moved me to come out to my parents. Um, and it was ill considered. Like I should not do anything before I've had my first cup of coffee. I don't think properly. I don't tell stories well. Nothing should be done before my first cup of coffee. So luckily I didn't. Um, a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, when I started making, a practice out of coaching people and working with them on their sexuality, and doing some outreach for alternative sexualities and all these things. When I started becoming a public face of sexuality, then I came out to my parents, because then I needed to be in front of the message, right? It's no longer a secret when I'm doing interviews and speaking to papers and going on television and presenting at conferences. At this point, my sex life is no longer much of a secret. So in order for me to stay on top of the message, I came out to my parents about a number of things, not about everything, because still, we don't talk about sex in my family. So most stuff isn't relevant to them. But my profession, the things I do, this stuff is relevant to them. So lots of things to consider when you're thinking about coming out to various family members. What way do you want to do it, and how much do you want to share with them? How much do they need to know? How much do you need people to know about you to feel like you're not living a lie? And I wish you the best of luck with this. Sometimes these things go really well, sometimes they don't, and it's always a little bit of a, hope and pray. So best of luck with that, whatever you decide, and I'll talk to you all next week.